What's up, amigos? Commander Jaime here today, and I'm excited to show off a Fenrir Premium deck profile. So it's been a while since we messed with Fenrir, and I feel like it deserves a little bit some love just to update it, even though we have lost Taro and some of the shenanigans we did like a year or two ago at this point. But still, like, Fenrir is a fan favorite too, and it has a place in my heart as well. So let's get right into it. I'm also a METAFY coach that has helped numerous players get their results in tops. I actually help with the standard, V Premium, and Premium formats, and I help you prepare for tournament preparation as well, so that way you get your results that you're looking for and helping out with your goal. I just want to help the community grow, and feel free to book a session with me. And also to help you out more, I also just came out with the book How to Win Cardfight Tournaments, Break Through Your Mental Barrier, and Topping Trading Card Game Tournaments. And so it's available for Kindle, paperback, and also the audiobook will be coming out soon. And it's the #1 new release as well. So I'm excited for you guys to see the content and value from it too and your results. So really think about the winning image for this deck. And I was just thinking about, like, what does Fenrir provide as a Genesis deck? Because we have so many options. We have Himiko, we have Regalia, and we have Valkyrian, for example, too. So, like, what does Fenrir bring to the table? And it's really one of its skills that really pop out as more, and it's the Counterblast skill. So essentially, whenever you Soul Blast a card, you have the opportunity to Counterblast and revive that card back onto Rearguard Circle. Now, what's really cool is that it's not only during your turn to help extend more attacks, but it's also during your opponent's battle phase. So you can revive cards that are a little more disruptive. And we do play a card such as Vanguard, which actually retires on place. And so you can have a Cannoneer type of play with Genesis, and Fenrir brings that to the table too. Furthermore, Fenrir is one of those decks that really utilize Veritrum even more so, because Veritrum it's kind of like its own Hetero Round in a sense. So when it's placed on Guardian Circle, you can Counterblast 1 and Soul Blast 3, and then you can choose one of your opponent's Rearguard Circles, and then essentially you call something from the top of the deck, and then that unit basically just ends up being retired. So it's one way to disrupt an opponent's Rearguard yet to attack, or get rid of pasturing Rearguards that have some skills that you want to get rid of during your opponent's turn too as well. So with the triggering of the Soul Blast, it's very key, and that's where you can have the Vanguard also be revived with Fenrir. So you'll be using 2 Counterblasts. You'll be able to spin something in a sense, and then the Vanguard will kill something. So you can pop 2 things at once. So that's one of the things that Fenrir does bring to the table. It's more of a control-based deck in that sense too. Not only that, but we have Minerva still. So Minerva, for those that don't know, doesn't require Regalia Heart. It only cares about Soul Blasting Regalia cards from the Soul to get an extra drive check, and also doing the GB3 restanding Vanguard turn. But really, it's doable. And I play some cards that help with the Soul Blast too, so you still have access to, one, having the Regalia name, and then using your Idriso and Norn pair, your engine, to restand your Vanguard. So you still have that aggression that Regalia decks bring if you need to fall back into that type of play, while still being on Fenrir as well too. So there's some flexibility, some cool interactions that you can do with, and I'm going to start diving into more of the card choices and go from there. So starting off with the grade 3s, we are playing 4 copies of Fenrir. We want to see it as maximum as possible, so that way it can be our Vanguard. Also, it has other skills that you can utilize too. So for example, it has an axe skill. You can Soul Blast 1 or more cards and then search a card from your deck that is the summation of the grades that you Soul Blasted, and then add it to your hand, and then you can Superior Call something from your hand onto Rearguard Circle. So a couple of things are happening. One, you're gonna +1, you're gonna search a card that you actually need to. So for example, if you search, if you Soul Blasted a grade 3 only, you can search for a grade 3 from your deck. If you Soul Blasted a grade 1 and a grade 2, the summation of that is 3 as well. So you can then search for a grade 3. So you can play around with that depending on what you need to search for, and it helps pretty much get anything in your deck that's typically a grade 3 or lower pretty easily to, guaranteed. And so there are some cards that I added just to help with, like, if you do write up going first and it makes sense to you to write up, because you can grade 2 game a little bit too. I know we have a lot of write down decks in the meta right now, so Fenrir is one of those decks that it has to have an uphill battle with those decks too. But casually you can write up and then also use the skill and have some type of aggression if you want to, or setup. It's really up to you at that point too. And then the other skill is that when it attacks, you can Soul Blast 1 and it gets 1000k. And so what it does is that essentially this skill is to trigger its Counterblast skill if you want to call something as an extra attack during your battle phase too. So just be mindful of the Soul Blast. It's usually not worth it. It's sometimes you want to conserve the soul for Marduk. And Marduk is our superior stride that you can do, which does take Soul Blast 6 and a Counterblast, so you want to be mindful of your soul as well. I've considered maybe reducing it to 3 just to make room for other things, and then it doesn't hurt to ride the other grade 3 that I'm about to show off, which is for Idrisos at this point too. So Fenrir is cool, but you don't necessarily have to like need it. But with having the Idriso too as well, if you go first, you have a restanding Vanguard because it is Regalia, and it searches for the Norn to be able to restand too, and equip gauges where you need them, and also have some kind of like defensive ability during your opponent's turn, so that way your cards with gauges are unaffected by card effects too. So depending on the matchup, you may not even ride Fenrir, you might ride Idriso and kind of go from there. And then if you do have the play where you restand, you can go into Marduk for a second Vanguard attack, and you see 5 dry checks as well. So we still have that pressure. They have the force marker too, so depending on if you ride Fenrir and you're searching for the Idriso and you put it on rearguard circle, you can place the force 2 marker on the rearguard circle with the restanding column as the Idriso column. Or if you do ride and then stride into like the Minerva, you probably are better off just putting the force 2 marker on the Vanguard and have a restanding Vanguard with crit pressure. So it's just some finagling in it with the force 2 marker, and you definitely want to play 4 copies of Idriso just to, you know, get a chance to see it as well. The next grade 3 that we play is 1 copy of Vanagander, and just as like I was mentioning, this is the card where defensively wise you can revive with Fenrir, and then when this is placed, Soul Blast 1, choose one of your opponent's rearguards and retire it. And then if this was on the Vanguard circle, it retires the whole board. So really you have it there to go into Soul and then use it whenever you need to with Veritrum. Also, you can play other cards that help Soul Blast during your opponent's turn, such as the Sentinel one. I think Secret Alcy, if that's the name of it, but I don't play it in this deck. I feel like with Veritrum and then also just timing it right can pay off in that moment too. Plus, if you play too many of other cards, it can hurt the consistency a bit. And what I really like about Vanagander too is that it has a second skill that really synergizes it to get it into the Soul. So for example, at the end of the battle, this attacked Vanguard, put this into your Soul, check the top 3 cards, put 1 at the top, put 1 on the bottom, and then put 1 into Soul. So it helps increase your Soul count. Good if you need to fill more Soul for Marduk. So before you swing with your Vanguard, you can swing with Vanagander, stack your deck, add to the Soul, and have a more threatening Marduk attack. So it's really cool. And then at the next turn, you already have it available as an option to retire something if you have the Veritrum in hand at that point too. I only play 1 copy, and it's just having the ability to do so. If you take it out, then the only defensive capability that this deck has is just the Veritrum. So keep it in mind with that. It's a love-hate relationship too, because like if you ride this, it sucks. But it's just an option. And so the next grade 3s that we play are the heals, the grade 3 heals. You need this to survive. You need to maybe have them for Stride Fighter too as well, because a lot of the grade 3s that we have, you call them to rearguard circle, such as the Idriso, the Vanagander, and then if you want to re-ride with Fenrir, you can, or even like if you play any of the ultimate strides or anything like that, you can do that too as well. In this build, I am playing the Overtrigger, so I'm not playing Ultima, but it's just, you know, grade 3 fodders for striding, and then of course G-guarding just to recharge your Soul and also protect your Idriso, which I'll cover in the G-guard section too as well. Onto the grade 2s, we're playing 4 copies of Norn. Just like I said with the Idriso Norn engine, you want to max copies so you can have a restanding Vanguard, restanding rearguard columns. Just very great engine for any Genesis deck, so I definitely recommend playing 4. You can ride this as Vanguard too, especially if you're going to grade 2 in game a little bit too. This is a good Vanguard to ride because you have the ability to counterblast 1, draw a card, and then give something engage and Soul Charge 2. So you're developing a Soul, you're drawing advantage, and you can potentially get into your pieces to have a better grade 2 game as well. Otherwise, you'll just digging in pieces to ride up and then stride and really kind of go from there at that point. The next grade 2s that we're playing is Ulysses, and so Ulysses is really cool. It's one of those cards that are free and return advantage, and so at the end of the battle, this attack the Vanguard, this can go into your Soul, you draw a card, and then you Soul Charge 1. So this card automatically gives you 2 in the Soul for the next turn to work with. You could also do this before maybe like the Vanguard swing to do Marduk, just to get Soul to 6 at least, whatever you're trying to hit. And so it's just super helpful. It's free, you don't have to worry about counterblasting or anything like that too. It's a card that you could put down early too, and it's a good early game aggression too. There's a card, Apple Witch Cider, in the grade 1 that I played. They both really work well, that you can just pop up down, attack, and get some advantage back, and also Soul Charge in the same time, which Genesis has that problem that you still need to develop a Soul to be able to do the things that it wants to do as well. So that's why I played Ulysses as well. The next grade 2 that we're playing is 3 Veritrum. So like I said, this Veritrum is really just the disruptive place. And I think 3 is enough so we can see it to the mid game at that point. You could also play this in the early game too. So if you're going back and forth and you're trying to make sure that like certain decks like need certain key pieces during the battle phase, like Nightmare Dolls, for example. They need to shove that one unit to be able to do their proper restand, so you can like all of a sudden do Veritrum, and then that can like ruin the whole turn, for example. So it's that option, but just be mindful again with the Counterblast, especially if you're using it. But it's a great card too, so that's why I feel Fenrir is one of those decks that really can utilize it to its best. Now for some new spice, and really I'm excited for this card too, and honestly I feel like this card can go in a lot of Genesis decks too, just in general. This is a Keter Sanctuary card from overdress, and so some people may not even like, what does this card even do? Because honestly it's not even used in standard. It's really more useful in premium, and so what it does is that when it's placed, you can Soul Blast one card, discard a card, and then choose a clan card from your drop zone and add it to your hand. It's a Greed Shade basically for any Keter Sanctuary clan, and what it really does too is that if you have anything in the soul, and if you have anything in the drop zone now, you have access to it. You can get it back to your hand and play with it too, which is big too. You know, funny thing, like I was facing Mega Colony the other day, for example, against Duke Cardfight. You can actually get your Idrisos or your Norns from your drop and add it to your hand and then call, even though you were on a Gridora turn, because it stops superior calls except from the hand, so you can just add it to your hand and normal call it that way too. So it raises the consistency of any card that you have in your deck. So for example, if you only have 4 Norns and 4 Idrisos, this kind of makes it feel like you have 5-6 copies extras to work with, because at the end of the day, most of the time you just need 1 Idriso and then also maybe 1 or 2 Norns to work with, and this card helps with just helping with that. There are other cards that you can use. You can use, like, for example, defensive quality, such as Veritrum. You got, like, your triggers or your grade 3 heal guardians as well. The one thing that it cannot grab is, like, other nation or Cray Elemental stuff. So, for example, if you play Rolox, you can't pick them up. If you have the OT, you can't pick it up too. So it's just one of those things that there's a minor restriction, but the benefits of grabbing whatever Genesis card that we have access to is great. And I do play some other cards too that are worth now playing again too, that we're consistently seeing, because Fenrir, it was really the only way up to the certain point where you can search anything that you want. But the problem is that now you're stuck on a Fenrir turn where you had to go into your main phase as Fenrir, and you missed out on a Minerva stride or a different stride, and you can go Marduk, but it just kind of took away from that. This lets you do it on stride turns, early game if you need to. It's just really helpful. This can potentially also, like, since you'll be massively soul charging throughout the games, whatever you soul charge now becomes accessible, and you can add it to your hand because you can soul blast it immediately and then just grab it with this card. So it's a way to dig deeper into your deck to make sure you ride to grade 3 consistently and you have your pieces going into your stride turns and moving forward. Onto the grade 1s. I'm playing for the Mikarahime. So this grade 1 has been really good in general with any Genesis deck. So what it does is when it's placed from hand, you can reduce the Soul Blast cost by 3 the next time you Soul Blast. So if you're on a Minerva stride, you Soul Blast 0 Regalias. That means you don't need any Regalias in Soul and you still get the quad check. For Marduk, this becomes Counterblast 1, Soul Blast 3. And if you have any other strides that also, let's say Amaruda's Soul Blast 15 skill, it becomes 12 instead of 15. And then if you have multiples, you can reduce it further to like 9, for example. So you have more flexibility in being able to do the strides, what they want to do, where the Soul Blasting cost is just mitigated in a generic sense. So it works with anything at that point. So that's why I play for this. It's just a really nice card just to have, especially when you need to place it. And then it also helps keep a soul for Veritrum too. And that's one of the things I wanted to also emphasize, because remember, Veritrum is Soul Blast 3 as well. And so it can empty your soul, and then going into your turn, you may not have a soul proper to do certain strides. So this helps mitigate that, so you have plenty of soul for Veritrum. And then especially if you have certain cards that you do want to keep, like Vanagander, for example, and you really don't want to Soul Blast it out by your turn's effects, you rather Soul Blast it by Veritrum's effects during your opponent's battle phase. So that's why even this card shines even more so. The next card that I play for is the Apple Witch Cider. So again, with the current metagame and just helping like fuel for the soul, I used to play High Tea, for example, which is the on-play Soul Charge 2. But I feel like Apple Witch Cider is more flexible, and it also gets around certain decks that can get rid of Regards, for example, like Narukami, Kagero, and so on, or Link Joker. So at the end of the battle that this unit boosted, you can Soul Charge 1 and bounce this card, or you could just Soul Charge 2. So it's optional. And so if you're going against a controlled, not a control type, but A deck that retires your resources, you can just soul charge one and then let it bounce. This helps you make some rearguard numbers that don't make it easy for your opponent to guard. And at the same time, it's just like every single turn leading up to your grade 3 turn, now you're soul charging one or potentially two per turn, and you have a fat soul by the time you reach to your grade 3 turn or your stride turns. So it's super helpful. Its defensive skill comes up once in a while, but it doesn't always come up. So essentially, when you put this into the Guardian Circle, you can put a card from your hand into your soul, and then it gets an additional 5k shield for every 3 cards in your soul. So for example, if you have 9 cards in soul, after putting the cost into it, then you get plus 15k shield. So you can put cards like Vanguard that you may drew into during your battle phase, like your drive checks, right? And then this shows it in, and then all of a sudden you have Vanguard live in the soul too. So you can do things like that too, which is really cool. You could also play the the grade 2 one that I showed from Keter Sanctuary. You can actually use Fenrir to call that one, and then Soul Blast 1, discard something, and grab anything to hand. So if you want to fix your hand rather than like disrupt a play too, so that's also possible. So cards like Cider just help get certain cards from the hand into the soul during your opponent's battle phase, and it's an optional. It may not come up as often, but it's something that I always like want to point out because you just never know. We are also playing 2 Skull, so this helps with the grade 3 consistency. So you want to make sure you ride the right grade 3 for that particular matchup. It could be Fenrir, it could be Idrisol. This can help fetch for the Vanguard during your stride turns too, so that way you can kind of have it live in that sense. 13k booster, 13k attacker. If you're going second too, it's even more imperative to have the grade 3 heals, especially if you're planning to grade 2 game, for example. That helps you survive better too. So it's just one of those cards that are very help with consistency. Then we have 1 copy of Claimer Harry, and so this card is a old GB live card. GB1, essentially once per turn when your card is soul blasted out, you could put that card to the bottom of the deck and counter charge. And so as you start playing this deck, and especially if you start using the Veritrums and Fenrir skill, you realize that you need some counter charge. Your strides and your Idrisouls use counter blast with the exception of Minerva. So you're like, oh, I got to figure out some counter charge management, and that's what Claimer Harry does. Space is really tight too. I was really considering to add a second copy, but if you're also grade 2 gaming on certain matchups too, it's a useless card. So I was just like, man, I wish I could play more, but I feel like the 1 copy is like barely getting away with it too. And as soon as you see 1 copy and it's on the field, then you're pretty good. This returns critical triggers too, any triggers that you want to return to, because if you soul charge triggers, it can be one of those feelings like, man, that sucks, right? But this card can actually bottom deck the triggers, and then you'll shuffle them too. And there's cards that shuffle your deck too, so which is really cool too. But again, it's for the counter charge management, and so it'll make Veritrum free, or your stride that uses a counter blast free, for example, whenever you soul blast. We are playing the starter, the V-Era starter. You just want to draw, get your ticket, and then also just dig deeper into your deck. Not really much to say. Playing for the Stride Fighter crit, it's important to be able to stride and keep your grade 3s into calling them into rearguard circles or writing up to get more force markers, so it just helps with that, and having crit pressure. And I am playing 2 more crit of the Keter Sanctuary. So if you feel like you need soul right before you go to grade 3, this could be a card that you can call on grade 2 turn, boost, and it'll go to a soul just to add to the soul. It's not as necessary, but I felt like not having a proper Marduk turn, if that's the go-to play, it can lose you the game too. So it's just helpful with that regard too. And some additional crits, kind of going into the Sentinels, is a crit Sentinel, so you still have some crit pressure. So what I noticed with the Fenrir deck, it still lacks some hand advantage, and so I wanted to make room for the 3 PG draws. If you're gonna play draws, I would recommend PG draws at that point. So I'm not playing the Elementaria, as you can tell. Again, space is tight, and I just felt like you needed like 3 PGs, but I don't feel like, or draw PGs, for example, but not like 4. So that's why I wanted to add the crit for pressure. And you want to make room for cards like the OT. OT is really good. And what's really cool is that even though if you soul charge it or had to guard with it because you hard drew into it, because we are playing Dreaming Dragon. So this is the card that I feel like even the grade 2 Keter card helps even grabbing too. Not only that you need to revive it with Fenrir, but you have that grade 2 that can grab it too if you need it from your soul or your drop zone. It can get damage checked, and then it eventually go to the drop zone, which you can get it. And what it does is GB1 at the end of the turn, this can go to your deck and then shuffle your entire drop zone into your deck, shuffle it, and then you draw 1 card if you return 10 or more cards. So really impactful, just to be able to like recharge your deck so you don't deck out. You will go through your deck really fast, especially with some of the cards that I'm playing to aggressively soul charge early on. So it's good just to recycle things, and then as you're soul blasting, you'll be able to return more of the triggers and the combo pieces that you actually need moving forward too as well. Onto the strides, we are playing 2 Mardukes. Again, you can do Fenrir skill search, whatever you need, whether it be an Idrisil, a Venegander, grade 3 heal, maybe a perfect guard, whatever it may be, and then you can go into a Marduk. So it's kind of like the best of everything too, and in case you can't stride, you can always use the second Marduk later on too, so I play 2 just in case. You have 4 Minerva still, so again, it doesn't require the heart to be Regalia. And again, if you have the grade 1 Soul Blast Reducer, you don't need any Regalias and so on, you'll be lit at that point too. So I definitely still recommend 4 copies of Minerva because it's such an aggressive stride, and in case you need to go into a restanding Vanguard but don't have a ability to countercharge to get the Norn from the Idrisil, you have the other Regalia strike, Muspel. So it's a good countercharger by Soul Blasting 3, and then now you have a counterblast where Idrisil can just fetch the Norn that you need and have a restanding Vanguard turn and pretty much be lit at that point, which I only have 1 copy of Amaruta in this build. It can come up, especially if you go with Fenrir going first, call Idrisil on the column and be aggressive in that sense. Now you can make that Idrisil column even more threatening to go critical 3 at a minimum, because it has a force 2 marker and then get a crit with that skill. You can draw some cards, develop a soul, and then if you do get to the Soul Blast 15 skill, you can have some Sentinel Guard restriction, which can come up. So never disregard Amaruta to be a finisher. It can be really something that your opponent's not expecting. The other card that I'm trying with Fenrir is Venegander, and so some of you may be like, wow, I haven't seen this card in a while. And the other question is like, why are you using this card? One, it doesn't use a counterblast. Again, we are only playing 1 Claimer Harry, and Veritrum and Fenrir's skills do use counterblast. There may be opportunities where you have to use those skills to survive, and now you have no counterblast, and so Venegander is there to really help you do something. Having the soul by G guarding and soul charging, and also just soul charging in general, you should have Soul Blast 6 easily, if not Soul Blast 3 with the grade 1 reducer as well. And what's really cool too, if you are an Idrisil as a Vanguard, like the heart, you could technically restand Venegander and then do the skill twice without paying the cost twice. So for example, GB2, you pay the cost, Soul Blast 6, and flip a copy, that's why you play 2. And it gets the Red Tech skill. So during the drive step, you can check the top 4 cards and stack them in any order from the bottom and top in any preference. So you can bottom deck 4 cards, you can leave 2, you can leave top at 4, you just rearrange them, whatever makes sense. Usually you're going to stack triggers in your favor, so it's just really threatening in that sense. And it's a Red Text auto skill, and it's not once per turn, so if you restand, you do it again. And another way to look at it is that you're digging into your deck deeper. So for example, if you know the over trigger is still in your deck and you feel like you have a chance to use it, and you have rear guards like grade 3s, for example, to take advantage of the extra drive checks, you can dig basically 8 cards deep for it if you do a restanding Venegander turn. And then by the time you get to the 8th card, you should be able to see if you were hitting the over trigger guarantee at that point. If not, then you're bottom decking 8 cards throughout that turn, and then your last drive check would be 2 drive checks because it's Venegander. That would be your last opportunities to drive check an OT. So you'll dig 10 cards potentially deep if I did the math right. But essentially, that's, if you're feeling it, that could be a play. It doesn't come up as often, but it is something that you can do. So for the J-Guards, we're playing something such as Dismal, Disprotects, really your Idrisils if they're on rear guard. It's super important to have those still live without having to worry about. So if you J-Guard and just Dismal it, then you're good. You also have the card that soul charges 3 generic cards and then gives you some shield value, but most of the time you just use it to soul charge resources. The better card that gives you more shield and more cards to soul charge from the drop is the Ear, the Regalia card. Choose 4 different grades and soul charge them, and you get like plus 15 essentially total, which is pretty easy. You just have to be mindful of what you're soul blasting and making sure you have that. You also have the Lowry, so this is the GB1 flip 1. This can return cards to help reduce deck out as well. If you don't have the Dreaming Dragon, for example, they have to be normal units, just so you know. But you can return combo pieces at that point too. And then lastly, I play one of the Anavarata, if that's how you pronounce it. This card is really good too. When you're thinking about the defensive plays that you're trying to do, if your opponent's Vanguard hasn't attacked yet, you can guard with this a rear guard, soul charge your rear guards, and that can help build a soul for Veritrum. And then the second skill also puts cards into the soul 2 cards, right? So you can soul charge strain away with your hand or your rear guards. And then the final skill that it does, it can reduce crit by 2 to any unit. So if you're guarding against a rear guard attack still, you can -2 crit a Vanguard, and so their Vanguard swing becomes less threatening, if not at all. They have to put 2 criticals on their Vanguard to even hit 0 crit at that point. So they're gonna, basically they have a Vanguard that doesn't do damage. And so now they have to stack the triggers on different rear guards, and that could make things a lot easier for you to guard at that point too. And that's it for the deck profile. I made this short too because you kind of get the gist. It's one of those decks you have to play and get a feel for it at that point too. I think I explained the combos just enough to get the idea. And you could also see my other video that I did, like guard combos with Veritrum, that really shows that off in action too. So I'll put it in the description and also like the card link as well. So I hope this was super helpful and also pretty cool to see, like, hey, what does an updated Fenrir deck profile look like in Premium? It would be cool to just play casually or attempt to also maybe win at locals or maybe a regional with it. What does that even look like? And I feel like it has some interesting cards to work with now that we had, you know, past that point of, you know, relying on Taro. So it's something to really try out for yourself and have fun with it. Also, I just wanted to mention too, if you haven't noticed, I actually published my first book, How to Win Cardfight Tournaments. It's already on Amazon Live, and it's really cool. Just an opportunity for players to get better for their Vanguard careers if they're seeking for it too. It helps for people that maybe haven't had tops, people that are having trouble to consistently top, and then also good for people that are already consistent toppers, leaders or readers, so it keeps them sharp in that sense too. And then you could also recommend it to other people that are just interested in improving as well. It's available on Amazon. I put the links in the description too, and it's also international available, so you're like Japan, Mexico, Canada, Europe, it doesn't matter. As long as you have access to Amazon Marketplace, you can get a copy for yourself. The ebook and the paperback are available, and then the audiobook will be coming soon, and I do narrate that too. So if you already are used to hearing my voice, you'll hear me speaking through a book. That's all I got. If you want to support the channel too, use the affiliated links: 50 card shop, trading cardman, TCG player. Also, if you want to improve your level at a more one-on-one basis, you can also book your session with a METAFY coaching session with me. Love to help out where I can. Really, my goal is just to help impact the community and help out players really see success in general. So, on to the next one, amigos. Bye!